Hello and welcome to the Indie Alternative Podcast. It's me, Chris. On this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Tom McRae. Tom is one of my all-time favourite songwriters, so it was an absolute honour to speak to him. When editing this episode, I realised just how much Tom goes into his writing process, how he structures songs and albums. It was a real joy, and I was a little bit nervous too, but it was fantastic, so thanks, Tom. If you want to support the podcast, don't forget there's lots of ways that you can do that. You can follow me on the social networks, and you can buy me a virtual coffee to say thank you. The links to that is in the show notes. And also, if you haven't yet rated the podcast or written a review, if you have time, that would be amazing. Anyway, no more waffle from me. Let's get cracking with Tom. Are you there, Tom?
I am, hello.
Whereabouts are you?
I am in my shed studio, which glamorises it slightly, in my house in Wiltshire.
And you're kind of rehearsing for getting back on the road?
Well, not so much the road right now. I have a one-off charity show, which is rescheduled from December, which is a sort of in real-life version of the live stream show that I was doing a couple of times during lockdown. And foolishly, I thought it'd be fun to just book a casual show and celebrate the end of COVID. But it doesn't quite work like that, so it's rescheduled for a few months down the line. So that's a one-off, and I won't be going out on the road until end of September, October. So it's sort of, it's more of a one-off thing, really.
So we sort of, you don't necessarily have to start rehearsing that far in advance these days, I'm guessing.
Well, that's a really good point, actually, because I've just been moaning about that to various people who put up with my moaning, is that I was just talking to a friend who drums for Tori Amos, and he was saying that they had the luxury of 5 weeks rehearsal. And he says even with, artists of that level, you rarely get any more than a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm lucky if I play with, say I do sort of a show with my trio with Ollie and Ollie, that we might get 7, maybe 10 days together at a push. Sometimes it's only been 5 days because kids, one lives in LA, one lives in London, I live in Wiltshire, and it's so hard to organise and so expensive that you never get enough time to rehearse whenever. So if I'm doing a solo show, sort of like this thing is now, it's a bit less pressure, really. I wouldn't start rehearsing for a tour like 8 months in advance, like you're suggesting. Not by a long way, but I'd like as long as I can get if there's other people involved.
Yeah, I mean, how do you approach these solo shows though? Do you we've got quite a catalogue of work, and are you kind of thumbing through your albums and B-sides and other little project work that you've done to try and find the perfect set, or do you have an understanding of? Sorry, do you approach it in a very fluid way on the night?
Yeah, both is the slightly crap answer to that. Is that I rehearse variations of the sort of songs that fill certain holes in a show, and a show sort of has a similar arc, whichever the songs are, really, if it's going to work. I like to start in a certain way. I like to capture attention. I like to quieten the room and then slowly open it out and then slowly involve the audience, and then by the end leave them in a sort of difficult with my music, but a sort of celebratory place. And I have songs that will do those things in different ways. And if I'll switch out certain slow numbers, or I'll switch out certain upbeat numbers of the very few that I have, because I on any given night, the one thing that I'm playing is not the songs, I'm playing the audience and the room. And that sounds a little bit pretentious, but that's something that I've learned over the years is that every audience is different, every room is different, and you can't just churn out the same thing, and you have to respond, and you have to feel the energy and feel what people need and what. Not let them tell me what to do, but let their energy sort of instruct me as to how I want to get them to the place that I want to leave them. Because if I go to a show, I want to leave that room transformed, and I don't care if it's perfect. I don't care if it's, sounds like the CD. I don't need it to be anything other than somehow emotionally transformative. So that's what I do. I write out all these songs and I go, it's like Countdown. I'll have one from column A, one from column B, two from column C, and cobble a set together that way, really.
And when did it? I mean, I would like to get on to sort of how you get the songwriting down and how you kind of approach each album, but take me back a bit further and how it all began. I mean, do you remember, your first influences and like your first sort of forays into songwriting?
Yeah, very much so. I think I had a similar path to anyone who ends up in music, really, is that I liked songs in a way that I felt perhaps it was hitting me deeper than it was my other friends when I was sort of 8 or 9, even younger than a teenager. Certain songs sort of spoke to me in a way that made me want to try and make something that had that same effect. And it was just I just messed around on instruments that were around the house, not doing anything effectively. And then I went to my first gig, and a cliche had my mind blown, and just wow, this is amazing. This is what I would like to do. And it took me, oh God, I mean, from 16 to 29, it took me a long time to get it together, to get a record deal. But it was that first show combined with a sort of burgeoning love of songwriters, especially, that sowed the seed, really.
Was there anyone in particular, any artist in particular, that you felt more drawn towards, like in terms of not necessarily like the content of the song, but maybe just their performance and their kind of their approach to it? Because you've got a very kind of, I wouldn't say macabre, but it's
you can say that
you're bringing people. How can I put this?
Down, bringing them down. Just say it, Chris. I'm bringing them down. Yeah.
No, but it is definitely it has that dark. It's dark, isn't it? It goes to a dark place. But where did that come from? Is there a particular artist that kind of moved you in that way to sort of spur you on to do something similar?
Well, that's tricky, actually, because the artist that I fell in love with that made me want to do this and sort of do my best to emulate the sort of effect they had, I wouldn't describe them as particularly dark. Paul Simon was the first songwriter I really fell in love with. In his melodies, they had a certain ambiguity to them, so even if they were a little bit more melodic or upbeat, they still ached. And I would qualify the sort of songwriting that I do and the sort of thing I'm attracted to is whether it's actually depressing or melancholy or dark or downbeat or some of my other attempts at a bit more, I don't know, upbeat songwriting. But I'm always looking for the thing that makes me ache, that gap in the music, that gap that you fall into with the lyrics, that gap that a chord change creates. So Paul Simon does that brilliantly, and his songs ache. And then from that, it was really singer-songwriters. So it was Kate Bush, and I would describe her work as pretty dark. A lot of it, even though it's melodic. Kate Bush, then through to then I fell in love with Billy Bragg. He was political, and I thought, he's writing these essentially pop songs, but he's taking away all the dressing of a pop song.
Yep.
So if Kirsty MacColl does a version of his song, then it's going to be a different thing. But he chose to deliberately steer his songs in a direction, and I thought that's really cool, because you get the melodicism and you get the hooks, but you don't have the cheese. So I kind of nicked that. I like that. And he has his dark moments, and then obviously the cliches, the Bob Dylan, because you can't really consider singer-songwriter dumb without thinking about the patron saint of them all. And then the great lyricists, Leonard Cohen. And I suppose Leonard Cohen is the one where the biggest darkness comes from, where I just thought, all your songs can sort of sound the same a bit, and all your songs can be a bit dark and a bit downbeat, and that's still okay, because I found myself listening to his songs and not getting bored of the albums, and it sort of felt like that gave me permission to just be a miserable git, really.
But those artists you've mentioned, they're all kind of, I would describe them as gateway drugs into, because they're all the sort of things that I would suggest. I mean, without listening to Pink Moon or and as you say, Paul Simon and obviously Dylan, they are the things that make you do it. I think essentially, if you are a solo artist or you move into a solo world from being in a band, they're the kind of artists that ground you into that space, I think.
Well, I think so. I mean, they are. Well, they're either the gateway drugs, or they're sort of like the foundation of it all, really, because of the era of modern pop music, when people started writing their own songs, and we went from, pre-Beatles to the Beatles, and then Dylan and everyone since, and you get the people who set the standard for everyone for all time. So you get probably the greatest of all time. You get someone like Joni Mitchell. You get these people who if you like them, do throw open the world. But it was always the solo artists and not bands for me. I love bands, and as a teenager I wanted to go and see bands, but I was always interested in the single voice, not just solo, but the singular voice. In what is someone's personality telling me? What is their... Paul Simon's a great example, because what's he telling you when he's in Simon and Garfunkel? What's he telling you throughout his solo career? What's he telling you through the breakup of that marriage, through the breakup of the next marriage? What's he telling you at this part of his... And I always thought that's like being involved in an ongoing saga. And for me, that again gave me permission to sort of cannibalize my own life, to have material without considering myself self-indulgent.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? I remember from myself, it was yourself, your early work, and Ed Harcourt and Guy Garvey and Damien Rice, all those kind of... Gemma Hayes as well, lots of singer-songwriters, and that was like... Then I remember speaking to other musicians around at the time and saying, I'm really into Damien Rice, Ed Harcourt. They're like, yeah, I like all that stuff, but if you need to go back to... You need to listen to Pink Moon. And I said, I don't know these people. He said, this is the real stuff. Go there, then you see where it comes from. And it's like, oh yeah, and I kind of missed it, because I was into heavy metal, and then I moved into sort of indie grunge. And then...
Well...
And I thought, well, I missed out all that kind of singer-songwriting kind of acoustic thing. And then as soon as I found that and I was pointed in the right direction for friends, it's like, yes, you definitely absorbed the history. Yeah, it was like, you were already involved in the whole acoustic movement and the whole kind of songwriting process with those artists like yourself. And then being drawn backwards into seeing where it all began. It was such a great voyage in that. It's such a rich amount of work, isn't it? Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, that follow on from that, it's incredibly exciting. I have to say, at 52, I am going backwards in time more than I am looking for contemporary work, because that sort of has to cross my radar in a way that by accident, really. But I like, you don't have to know it. Why should anyone of a certain age have to come forearmed with all the knowledge of, well, 1974 was the best year for music, and who cares? You're born into your era, and so you like, Ed Sheeran or whoever, and then that might lead you back as you mature, and your tastes might slightly change. And I listen now to older blues guys. I listen to older recordings. I listen to stuff that I'm pathetically ignorant about, and that's the brilliant thing about the river of song and the journey that if you're a writer, that you're just part of, and you might be you might not even be a ripple in that river of song, but you that baton's been passed to you, and you pass that bit on, and that's the whole way it's supposed to work. So I find my lack of knowledge less of a disappointment to myself, and more like a thrilling thing to, I can fill that hole. Thanks to evils like the internet and Spotify, I can go, there's no excuse now. I could just press songs like this, and I can lose myself for hours on end. And I like metal. At 15, 13, 14, Iron Maiden was probably my favourite band. I had studs on the back of my denim jacket. I still love AC/DC. I got a big soft spot for all those big songs. Big tunes.
You always go back to it. I think at a certain point, whatever you're doing, you just have to riff out, don't you?
I think so. Yeah. No, you've got to bring the noise. I mean, it's rock and roll. You have to, and I found that my voice couldn't really compete with that, and I couldn't get the nuance of what I wanted to say. But you unpack those songs. I mean, those chord changes.
Yes.
they're like the big songs of punk. They're all just pop songs, brilliantly done pop songs.
Tom, are you always writing? I mean, whether it's for yourself or for if it's just an idea or a project that's going on, you always got a pen or your dictaphone to hand or iPhone.
Yeah, I guess again the terrible thing is this terrible cliche, but although I might not be sitting down at an instrument, I consider myself always clocked on because ideas sort of can come from anywhere when you're on a train driving, whatever, snatches of overheard conversation or melodies that pop into your head, and so yeah, I like everyone, I have voice notes full of that on my phone, and I guess I am, but now that I have a little bit more time generally around the studio, I tend to write by accident. I don't sit down and go, "This is the writing time." I think I noodle. I think
Mm.
the key to writing regularly is to not think that you're writing, is to distract your higher function by watching TV or whatever, doing something and just noodling, and then you might strike on a chord progression, and then I'll look around the walls and I've got lyrics up on my walls, and I'll go, oh, that fits that, and you're off and running. But then even then they'll stay as just little snatches of ideas for months and sometimes years until I actually sit down and you know grind it out. But yeah, I guess short answer, it's too late for that. But the short answer is yeah, I think I'm always writing.
Is there a more most productive time? I mean, I don't know. Most artists seem to think that, or seem to say that they're most the twilight hours and the evenings and nights is when they're the desperate, not the desperation, but the it's that witching hour, isn't it, of getting the emotions out, and you feel a little bit more isolated, and I don't know. Are you freer, a little bit more kind of less inhibited at that time? Are you the same? I'm getting around to a question here, but are you the same?
Sure, yeah, I am, and that again, it feels a little bit cliched, but I think the reason, I mean, my life and work and my income is derived from music, so there's lots of different things I do within that, and lots of those things are for other people. But for me, the thing where a song really starts to get its little claws into you and say finish me is when I'm starting to connect the words and emotions to a melody, and really I don't ever feel that I can make myself vulnerable enough to go looking for that ache that I was talking about earlier
Mm.
during daylight hours. And that that's not just a cliche of, oh well, everyone else is using up the daylight dream space. It's not that. It's that I need to go away somewhere alone and quiet, and just focus on allowing myself to let that space for those emotions bubble up. And there's no way of saying this without making it sound pretentious, but if I'm just singing words to a tune, it's just words to a tune, unless there's something about it that sort of makes I feel that thump in my chest, where I've gone, oh, I think I'm saying something to myself here that I need to hear. Then it doesn't
Mm.
really become a song. So yeah, it's after dark, a little glass of something maybe to relax me, dim the lights, and just think about, well, not think, try and not think, and try and let the song tell you what it wants to be, really.
And do you have different hats for different occasions? Because you write all sorts of different things, and you write for films and TV and
Yeah.
everything, and obviously there's your solo work. And how are you differentiating between this? Is it like a
Ah,
job? I mean, it's obviously like a job.
well, it is a job. I mean, a great job. Very lucky, and I love it, and I
Yeah.
love I love many aspects of it. I, I guess the more difficult jobs that require precision that other people are paying for, things that are time coded to picture, I do when I'm awake in the daylight hours, and I think first thing when I wake up, I'll come down and have a cup of coffee and just warm up the fingers, and sometimes that's really good because I haven't really woken up, and you'll just stumble upon something, especially writing to picture. You'll be watching it and go, oh, and without even thinking about time signature or key or whatever, you find that you've written something that fits emotionally, and that's a good start. So that's a sort of a hat. And then when it comes to if I'm translating lyrics from French to English for another artist, or I'm doing something, then that's kind of I'll do that at a certain time of day where I can I feel that, not that I'm not delivering the art, but I'm delivering more of the craft. And I think that
Yeah.
sometimes I'm paid to do the crafting bit and song doctor for people. Um, and I guess I get the scrag end of the day. That's the bit reserved for me. Is the scrag end where I think I do my best stuff when I'm slightly tired, and
Yeah.
and not thinking about, oh, I will write a song now, because the minute you sit down thinking I'll write a song, you don't do anything.
How do you know you've done it? I guess with either the your own work for your own sort of your own compositions, or for other artists or other projects that you've got on. Is there an internal mechanism or a little light that goes off and says, "Yep, that's done, good"?
Well, without being glib about it, there's an external clock that says the schedule is here, and the deadline is there, and you've already missed it. So I mean, and I think deadlines are useful, because that's applied to the work I do for other people. There's, can we have it by this time? And thank you very much. And with my stuff, it's, here's the release date that I've had to set however many weeks or months in advance, and here's when the factory can try and get your vinyl or CDs back by, and here's when the tour's booked. So there's always the notion of deadlines, and to be honest, if you took those away, I would still be mixing the song that I'm working on, because now that I write, produce and mix my own stuff mostly, I would never stop. You literally have to take me away from it. And if I could have the masters back for all my stuff, I'd tweak it endlessly. I'm terrible, really, really terrible. And like everyone says, you don't finish something, you abandon it. You go, that's as good as I can get it, and then maybe 10 years later you can hear it without hearing all the mistakes.
Yeah, are you super critical of your previous work then? If you stick it on, are you still going over it in your head?
Yeah, I mean, I used to say it took about 10 years. I think it takes a lot less now. I'm a bit more forgiving. And now I've sort of gone round the clock face, so I'm back at 5 to midnight, where I wish I could be as free and as careless. I wish I was
Right.
as happy to make those mistakes and let them go by, or happy to just think that something's good enough. Because sometimes if you go, I'll just do that first thing, and then you spend months trying to go, but the first thing it's got to be this other thing. Otherwise, what have I brought to the process? And then the 28-year-old you goes, no, mate, the first thing was the best. Just relax. So yeah, you have to unlearn a lot of the craft as well. Is the truth, I think.
I wanted to ask you about your albums and how you approach them, or do you approach them in a as a project, or are you just, is it a body of work? And I hate to say the concept album, because they're not, but I believe that probably artists do have in the back of their mind, will treat something at a point in time and stamp it with some sort of concept. But do you know what I mean? Is that something you do when you're approaching a new record?
Only in as much as, well, in two aspects. The one most important aspect is, have I got anything to say? And that comes down to my love of my favourite artists. Not only do their albums fall in that sort of roughly 2 or 3 year cycle, which happens to be the way the world decided that the marketing and touring cycle would work, but also that's sort of how your life breaks down into chunks that I felt I had learned something, or something had changed that I could write about. So I don't look at the albums as any more than a concept, other than if I'm writing 10 or 12 postcards to myself about where I'm at, am I telling myself anything new? And if I'm telling myself something new in those, on the back of those postcards, I'm getting clever now, let me work out this metaphor, then the picture on the front of those postcards would be the sound palette. And is that sound palette going to be slightly different? Is it going to be deliberately shit sound palette? Is it going to be more keyboards? Are you going to put more drums? Are you going to make the sound crunchy or cleaner or more open? Or that's the combination of, have I got something to say, and what sound palette will interest me enough to get me to the end of the process.
Is there an album that you kind of look at more fondly than others? Is there a favourite child amongst it all?
There is, really. I mean, I think Did I Sleep and Miss the Border for me is massively important, because it's the very first album where I demoed everything at home in my studio, took it to a studio in Wales, got the band to play along, come up with other parts, combined the parts that I'd done at home with the band, and then I mixed the whole thing from start to finish. And it took me months, and I got as close to the sound that I'd wanted right from the start. Sort of in 2001, it took me 14 years later to get to the point where I was able to make the sound I'd been hearing in my head, and I think I think some of the songs are great, and it's a good range of songs, and I took some risks with the sound and the sound palette, and pushed myself into other areas. And I think the one thing I listen to or listen for in my own work, should I hear it in certain circumstances, is to be surprised. Where do I not recognise myself? What's the thing that I don't hear as me? And if I hear chunks of things that aren't me, I find it thrilling. The minute something sounds like me, to me, I'm instantly bored.
Oh, you have another album coming up, or have you been writing away?
Yeah, I have. I think everyone who's been lucky enough to not be too panicked during lockdown, I've got a ton of material, and my last album was 2017. So I've actually got a ton of songs, but in and around that, I have no clear idea as to what the vehicle for those songs should be. I have a new agent and a new manager and a new team in probably my best territory, which is France. So I know that I'm working on a very specific set of songs, which are conceived as mostly duets with French artists for France for 2023. That doesn't cover me for 2022. So I have all these other songs, some of which might make an album, but some of which might be just songs that are sort of standalone. And I think, given A, this point in my career where no one's really waiting for anything, and B, with EPs and Spotify, I could probably come up with some rationale to group these songs together and just say, well, look, here's a little bit of a journey over the last 5 years, and put them out without plan or without kind of seeking to justify them. And I think I'm slowly figuring out how to do it. And I was always a little bit worried that you need a raison d'etre for these songs to speak to each other. And then when you listen back to them, you often find that they're speaking to each other in ways you didn't know anyway. So I think I might do a series of EPs this year, and then what I consider the album proper for 2023.
And these collaborations that you've done over the years as well, what attracts you to a collaboration? Sounds corny, but is there anything specifically you're looking for, or do you get approached often?
I get approached, and I always say no. I mean, always. The truth is, I've never liked it. And I've done things with friends, and I've done things that I've been paid to do, and I've done things in the early days in writers' rooms, and I've asked to be, the third wheel in a room, just as someone to like run interference and make a fool of themselves, while said artist sort of is allowed to be, made to feel creative, and that's fine. I've learned from all of those, but the truth is, I don't like the sausage factory aspect of collaborating in that way. And I don't really like making myself vulnerable in front of people I like and respect, because my natural position as a person, as an artist, is to go, I'm shit, I'm going to make this bad, don't let me ruin your song, and please don't call me again. And I'm only just learning to just fucking relax and go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the song works out. It doesn't matter if it's not the best song in the world. Just make something, learn from it, have a bit of fun. And the key thing is have a bit of fun. And so I'm starting to do that. And then when I did a songwriting retreat a bunch of years ago with National Treasure Catherine Williams, who I've done some stuff with before, I met this girl called Laurie Evans, and she, out of the blue, just said to me, did I want to do something? And I felt so unarmed and disarmed by someone saying to me right up front, do you want to do something? I forgot to say no. And the more I listened to her own work and her voice and the sort of ideas that she was bringing to the project, I just thought, this is crazy. It'd be crazy not to get involved with someone who's this talented and whose approach is different to mine. But I think I can genuinely compliment it. And it felt blameless. It was locked down. It felt like there was nothing riding on it. No labels, no budget, just us kicking songs around. And it was, one of the most fun things I've done, I think, in recent years.
And did you find yourself just going to places, songwriting-wise, that you've never been to in that process then? Did it open up different side of you, maybe, potentially?
Well, absolutely, yeah, and again, as I sort of alluded to before, I get quite bored of being me, and certainly bored of perceptions of me, and when you can write in character, or even partly write through someone else's eyes, and especially if Laurie's come to me with songs that they might not have finished lyrics or lyrics at all, but they've got a strong emotional content which I can divine just from hearing her sing and play them. I'd go, I think I know what this song should be about, and I think I have a way of telling the story, and would sort of feel that unburdened by having to be me, and just use it as almost a third entity that part of her and part of me had created, and it had come together as this different thing. So she's singing lyrics that aren't 100% her. I'm writing lyrics and singing lyrics that aren't 100% me, but the songs when they're finished are absolutely 100% us. It was a brilliant learning process for me.
And this material, is it ready? Is it available? Are you releasing it, or has it been released?
Well, the Evans McRae album came out. That's the thing we did with me and Laurie Evans. That came out early this year or late last year, I think. I don't know where we are in the years. Who knows? I don't even know when recycling is, to be honest. It came out at some point in my lifetime, and we put it out on vinyl, and everyone seemed to like it, and we made some little clips. That was great, and I would heartily recommend that, Evans McRae. It's quite different for both of us, but equally you can sort of hear our solo influences, and the rest of the stuff. I guess the answer is it'll dribble out slowly over the year, and then probably hopefully in time for the tour. That's exactly how organised I am at this point in my life.
Well, I mean, the last few years have been trying for everybody. I mean, that's probably about as organised as you can possibly be. The fact that you've got a tour booked and some stuff to do is a miracle in itself these days, I think.
Oh, God, it absolutely is. I mean, this is a constant conversation between me and my friends, is that we're all doing tours that have been rescheduled at least twice. So this tour I'm doing now was booked for the 20th anniversary of the debut album. So this was booked for 2019. Yeah. And I was going to do, from start to finish, in order, the debut album songs, do all that cliche, brilliant, bang it out on vinyl, lovely. No, COVID put paid to that. So okay, well we'll shift the tour to 2020, and then with the second wave, my agent called up and said, "Let's not even bother. Let's just move it to 2022." So I said, "Okay, let's move that." So that got shifted, and then everything subsequently gets further down the line. So because of the way my world works, especially with different release schedules for different countries and different teams, is that I then I'm looking at booking this time next year, or February, March. I have the bigger tour of regional France booked, and then I'm looking for a bigger solo tour of Europe at the end of 2023. So now my year has gone from I'll just book some shows 6 months in advance to I'll book some shows 9 months in advance to now I'll start looking at shows 2 years in advance, because everyone's had their shows knocked on. And it's getting busy out there. So even clumsy, slightly crap, disorganised me has to pick up the phone and say to people, should we make some plans?
Tom, I'm going to let you go because we're wasting decent songwriting hours here for you. We're into the twilight area.
Yeah, you've got whiskey drinking hours.
You got your whiskey. What's that? Scotch?
It is. Yeah. This is a nice little smoke head, quite a strong peaty Islay malt. Heavily watered down, I'll point out, because I'm still at work.
Yeah. Just to get you lubricated.
Exactly, yeah.
Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Good luck with everything. I'm sure everything will be fine, and touching all the wood possible. And I'm looking forward to hearing the new material.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good wish and a good send-off. Everything will be fine, I'm sure. Is probably the best way to approach World War III and climate disaster.